Hello there guys. Okay, so today we're going to connect from our Visual Basic project to a Microsoft Excel worksheet. So let's start a new project and work from there. Okay, so I've created a new project. My project at the moment, I've called it ConXL, and for you to be able to access Excel itself, you need to import the project library. So you go to your properties, go to references and select add. In your com properties, in your com tab, sorry, you want to look for Microsoft Excel. Now if you have Excel 2007, you'll have 12 object library. If you have Excel 2003, you'll have the version 9 library. So if you obviously have Excel 2010, then your library might be bigger than that. But seeing that I only have 2007, I'll select Excel 12, click OK. And you can see that they've now imported the Excel object library itself, Microsoft Office object library, and the Visual Basic application extensions. So there's one more thing that we need to do, and that's import the interop. So we look here at the bottom, and it should be close to the end of the list, and it's called Microsoft Office interop. Click on that to add a reference, and that is it. So scroll back up here. So all we now need to do is create a reference and work with the reference. Okay, now that we've imported the references, we need to create an object and refer to this object every time we want to refer to the actual application. So to do that, we need to just drag a button click, and on the code behind, we can refer to it as my Excel as new Excel application. Now the Excel application is just the actual container, so we need to put a workbook in it. To do that, we go my Excel workbooks, add. So that'll actually put in a blank workbook, but it still won't be visible. So what we need to do is my Excel.visible equals true. So we've created an instance of the application, added a workbook, and then forced it to show. So let's see what it looks like. Okay, so you can see it pops open Excel with an actual workbook in it. The problem is though that you sometimes don't want people to see the workbook. So if you leave the workbook invisible, then the workbook itself would actually run as a process on your PC. So you have to add the following code, and you do this saying my Excel dot workbook dot close and my Excel equals nothing. Okay, what if you don't add these two lines? It won't close the workbook, and your workbook will actually be running in your task manager. So you'll need to go to your processes and close all Excel .exe processes before you can open a new workbook. So it's quite important to add these two references at the bottom. So if you want to add a new workbook, you can add a new workbook, or if you want to add an existing workbook, you can actually say open, and in the open you create a statement saying where your workbook is. So that's just an example. I don't actually have a test Excel sheet there, but it's just an example to open an existing document. Okay, so now we know how to create a workbook and we know how to open an existing workbook. So the next step that you might want to do is add some values to your workbook. To do that on a single cell basis, let's start with activating our first cell. To do that, we go to My Excel and select a range, which is A1, and set it as active. Okay, so that is our active cell now. It's range A1, and if we want to put a value in that range, we'll go My Excel dot active cell. I usually go for formula R1C1 for the reason that it displays an actual text value instead of a format of a currency. So even though I've got a value of 75, you'll see that it's in quotation marks, meaning it's a string value that it changes it into. So first of all, our range gets selected and activated, and then in the active cell it'll then add the text. So let's just go and play this and see how it goes. And you can now see in range A1 our text value of 75 has been placed into that work. Alright, so that all works fine, but it's not very sufficient if you want to let's say for instance have a whole row of information that you want to fill in, or a bunch of columns that you want to populate with data. So to revert to every range is going to be very tricky because you don't know how many rows or columns there might be. So what you want to do is create a loop. Now I've already created the code for that. There's a little mistake. Okay, so I've already created the code for this, and what it does is it creates a counter which starts on 0, then it selects our range A1 and activates that. So our active range is A1, and then it loops until it reaches a counter of 10. So every time it loops, it adds 1 to our counter, so it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, due to the fact that we start on a 0 plus 10 equals 9. So when it reaches 9, it'll kick out our counter. But every time it'll add a counter value into the active cell. So for every cell that it passes, it'll add our value in there. And to change the cells, we go and create an offset, which is 0 rows but 1 column, and then it sets that cell as the active cell. So let's run it and see what it does. There you go. So for every column it changed, it added our value, and it stopped at 9 as we predicted. And the offset, you can see, works very fine if you're working in this direction, or you can change, if you don't want to do the columns, you can change it to 1 row and 0 columns, which will then move your selective cells down. Or even if you want to go up or to the left, you'll just put a minus value in front of your rows that you want to offset, and that'll actually revert back or up any which way you want. So that's a good way to set your active cells.